This is a production of Cornell University.
And it's actually going to start out, if you'll indulge me a little bit, Carl, in a travel log. Um,
Absolutely.
I guess a little bit of turf tourism with my former student and good pal, Micah Woods. And so I got to ride the train. I'll talk about that a little bit. But, this is Mount Fuji from the window out of the train. And, this is a sacred place there. This is one of those things that this culture really holds sacred. It's a very old culture, of course. And, it's my second time back. I went to the International in July and got a nice taste of it, and then got to go back again. And I thought I'd go through some stuff, bunch of turf stuff I got to learn that I think would be really interesting. And big thanks to the Toyo Green people who brought me and Kaminsky over. We were quite a pair. And this is Kyoko and Shoot, who were two of our hosts while we were there with a simultaneous translation. John would give his he would say something and then he would stop and it would get interpreted, and then you say, so a 45-minute talk took 90 minutes. It was 3 solid days of interacting with this really well-run company. And they take a lot of pride in bringing folks over and treating us nice, and they're very proud of their country, as they should be. What a joy. Anyway, I stayed in the Nihonbashi section of central Tokyo. This is the sunrise, my first day out the hotel window. But I got to tell you, Carl, there's a big shout out to heated toilet seats, brother. Let me tell you, once you go to a heated toilet seat, there's no going back. And the bidet is second to it, but definitely the heated toilet seat. You got to have it. I rode the subway and the regional train. As you can see, it is expansive. This is a very much island country, right? They have figured out how to make the most of the space that they've got. People have very modest homes, 600, 700 square feet for 4 people. And, you don't host people at your house. You want to see people, you go out. And it's just a very different thing. And so the trains are no exception to that. The subways in Tokyo are just a ball for a kid like me to ride around in. Went down to the southwest of Tokyo, about an hour and a half train ride to a town called Kamakura. And it's a beautiful seaside community. Of course, as you might imagine, Japan's an island, so you get a lot of these things around the country. I got to see the Great Buddha, the Daibutsu, built in the 1200s. It's about 50 feet tall, weighs like 10,000 tons. It's like 200,000 pounds, something like that. And you can go in the inside of it. And the funny thing is, the tsunamis have like wrecked buildings around it and taken off the footing underneath it, but the statue still remains. It's really again another sacred space in the Japanese culture. So there he is, Micah Woods
Yeah.
and I, and of all things, right? You're in Kamakura, and Micah finds this place where Dr. Robert Koch of Koch's postulate in disease study, right, has visited a scientist in the Kamakura area, and this was a favorite place of Koch, and they honored it with this statue and this plaque behind it. And there's Micah and I up at the top of this beautiful thing. And as I mentioned earlier, Carl, I'm a train guy, so I got to ride on the Shinkansen. I mean, this basically, I went from New York to Chicago in about 5 hours on this train. And that same train ride would take close to 25 hours in the United States of America. And it's just, a real big difference where you prioritize this kind of travel over car travel. So man, when you're spinning along at 200 miles an hour, it's quite a fun experience. Anyway, that's where I went. Now, growing grass wise, this is like from Raleigh, North Carolina. Tokyo's about Raleigh, North Carolina, and then Fukuoka, where I went down to see Andrew McDonald at Kia Golf Club, and stopped at Hiroshima on the way down. And I went to Hiroshima, and there's the dome that couldn't have been more than several hundred yards from where the bomb was dropped. And here's a tree that withstood the nuclear blast that was still there. And, this is a place where, it reminds us of the madness that sometimes we put ourselves through. And these people have really rebounded in an enormous way. And it's a harbinger for all of us to think about, right, in these times. Anyway, I got to go to the Hiroshima Carps home field, and it is an overseeded Tifway 419 like Bermuda grass. I don't think they worry about as much purity about things over there that we worry about here. But you see what's interesting, Carl? They only cover the dirt. They don't cover the
Yeah.
grass at all. This would be my pal Dan Cunningham would love this because, he laments all the time when he's got to cover the infield from the rain. The grass doesn't get the rain event, and there's certainly something to that. And we see different equipment. You see a lot of Baroness and Shibaura hand mowers. They're all red, but they're very different than the kind of red stuff that we see in this country. The golf courses will spray their zoysia grass. It's Matrella in the fairways, tees and greens, and then it's Japonica in the rough. Zoysia japonica in the rough, and they pigment those areas. And I'm sure, and I know they spray herbicides a fair amount in the blonde areas as well to keep them
Mm.
looking good like that. And they got bent grass greens. And so this happened to be down in Fukuoka where, bent grass greens in Savannah, Georgia.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Mm.
I mean, I don't think so. They got rid of bent grass greens at East Lake, right? And now they
Mhm.
got ultra dwarfs there. So very interesting because they get really hot and humid and rainy. They get a lot of rainfall. They probably get maybe 50% more than we get up here.
Okay.
Quite a bit more. They get quite a bit more rain. And so weeds are a big issue in the dormant turf. And then you eat, Carl. Let me tell you, brother. Then you eat. And here's Tumi-san. This little restaurant has like six stools and one table. And he doesn't let people in who don't have a reservation or aren't from the neighborhood. And so he prepped us up some sashimi, and then we had this matsunami. It's like tripe with tofu and onions and cabbage, and he just cooks right on the table. It's as good as it gets, Carl. And there's Andrew McDonald
Mhm.
with Micah. This is Andrew's neighborhood where he lives in Fukuoka. And we went to his golf course the next day, and he's doing something he works very closely with Micah.
Mhm.
So they really dial in how they manage the growth of this zoysia grass, these zoysia grass surfaces that Andrew manages. And he's actually been playing around with sand. I'm not sure I've ever seen sand this fine used on a golf course. He applied it once last year. I think it's just a good thing to think about when you start adding different sand types, how they make their way into the profile. This was after an application and working its way down. Okay, Carl, 5-person golf carts because the caddy
Oh.
goes in and all the caddies are women.
Hmm.
All the caddies are women, 5-person golf courses, and they're on a track. The you can't, it's like an amusement ride, except it's
Yeah.
not metal, it's an actual magnet you're on a track on the thing. They post green speeds and what they call compaction. This second number is, when you interpret it, it's called compaction, which must be some firmness value that's generated on this particular golf course. um, on the back of the carts, they've got every cart has a thing to wash your clubs that you carry with you, and the other green thing is for divot mix. So, this is the kind of thing. You see how the clubs are there. You don't get 2 carts or 5 guys, 5 carts, plus a sixth cart for a caddy, whatever madness we do here, because you make so much money on it here, right? That's why they do it.
Mhm.
Hey, I found Rick Slattery like this, found a low flow nozzle
Yeah.
at Andrew McDonald's place in Fukuoka. Anyway, this was out my hotel room in Fukuoka, and I'm looking over at the dome here, where the Fukuoka team, I think it's called the SoftBank Hawks. This is Sudahara O's team. play manages here, and they're baseball crazy in Japan, Carl.
Yeah.
They're baseball crazy in Japan. And so we went back on my way back from Fukuoka. One day, Micah and I went into Okayama to see a baseball game. But first, we stopped at the Korakuen Garden. This is a place where they burn the zoysia grass,
Mhm.
Carl. They set
Okay.
it on fire, weed control. It's good for organic matter management, but you also see on the right here how they burn around the trees, right? They don't go
Yeah.
near the trees. There's a bunch of these
Mm.
trees in the garden, and you see this great castle overlooking this. And Carl, we're talking about 20 acres of burned zoysia grass. I'm
Yeah.
just showing you a little bit here. So here's the game we went to in Orikama, Oriyama, and they use black sand. It's nowhere near firm like what we're
Okay.
used to. Now, this is a minor league ballpark with dormant zoysia in the outfield and synthetic turf in the infield. So this is like where they play sometimes the pros will play at Binghamton, right? Or they'll
Hmm.
play at the Hall of Fame. So these are two. This was Hiroshima and it was the Rukatan Eagles. I think they were from up north or something. But you know what the best part of this is, Carl? They got bands. They got bands at the baseball game. It sounds like a college football game. All right. So back to upstate New York, Carl, and this is what our fields look like, right?
Hmm.
And throughout New England, I'm sure all of my brothers and sisters are at the New England show this week. We're probably talking about how long it's going to be till they do anything. This is what our soccer field looked like a while ago. And I know, Carl, part of this story is soil. So I wanted to give you a chance to talk about, happened to be a section of the website that we're currently renovating as well and thinking through how we want to handle this. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so you showed a picture of Andrew McDonald's
Yeah.
soil profile of his zoysia greens there, and he's adding some sand. And one of the things we've been doing in the last couple months is really rethinking how we want to structure our sports field website and having some sort of minimum standards for fields. And of course, there's elite level standards
Yeah.
for FIFA and the
Yeah. Yeah.
NFL now have
Yeah.
standards, but really thinking about this and you just showed that minor league stadium, all the 99% of the rest of fields that exist in communities, in
Yeah.
schools,
Yeah.
at the lower levels. So what are sort of the minimum stand? We focus on soil all the time, right? And we're grass people, but we're really mostly soil people, and the engineering of soils is really interesting. When you look at the ASTM standards, they have a lot like the USGA specifications. Each gradation of soil particle has a standard now, and that next slide you'll have there, Frank, shows for each band of physical properties from 1 to 2 millimeters, we want to have less than 20%. We want to
Mhm.
focus a lot of our sports field soils in that coarse sand, 0.5 mil to 1 mil, almost 50%.
Mhm.
And this is really great, right? There's a reason this is engineered as such because it
Mhm.
drains, it resists compaction, it allows for the driftgrass to grow. But even thinking beyond this, what are the performance factors in a soil that matter, right? We design all those engineering specifications a certain way to give us performance. What's the actual performance we care about? And we look at things like porosity, bulk density probably relates to how firm or compacted a soil can get. But I think I always come back to just does a soil drain? And if a soil is draining, I think it gives you all those other things. And we see in the ASTM standards these saturated hydraulic conductivity, which is essentially infiltration rate. They're not quite the same thing, but um, for our purposes, we can just interpret them as the same thing. For native soil fields, their minimum standard, and this seems rather low, Frank,
Yeah.
0.75 inches per hour.
But I
They
think
say,
the assumption is they're going to have surface drainage. That if you
yeah,
have a field like this, you give up
correct.
internal drainage
Hmm.
for surface drainage. And this is what Joe Maglioka did years ago at T-Burg when he redid the field, was to pitch it, put drains. We weren't going to dig out the fields, put
Hmm.
drains in, right, and then shed it somewhere so it can get collected into some pipes and do it. So I think that's why they
Yeah.
get away with this. I think when you look at the sand base, the sand base systems, right, you see the dramatic difference, right? And it
10
was
inches an hour.
right.
Yeah.
And again, what we're thinking about, and what I'm going to talk about at the end here is you know this is like the more of this you get, the more use you can take, right?
Yes.
I mean, because you're much less, the other part of it is compaction too, right? It isn't just
Mhm.
the water moving through. So
Yeah.
so then there's the chemical properties, which I'm glad to see you put that second here.
Yeah, so the physical properties number one, first and foremost. We're going to go to that first before we get to the chemical properties. But and you were with Micah all last week, who has really helped sort of promote the minimum levels of sustainable nutrition, the guidelines, how you interpret a soil test. It's not just you take a soil test, but how do you interpret the numbers? And these are very much minimum standards as well. If you simply stay above 37 parts per million potassium or 21
Mhm.
parts per million phosphorus, we have a very high level of confidence that the turf grass has all it needs to be healthy. And for those watching on the screen, we have comparison to the older guidelines, the SLAN approach,
Mhm.
which you'll see suggested at least almost three times more potassium,
Mhm.
twice as much
Mhm.
phosphorus, twice as
Mhm.
much calcium.
Yeah.
So again, this sort of minimum standards. And if we boil all this down, I come back to like maybe it's just does a field drain and does it have enough nutrients? And maybe we can avoid some situations like, I got a picture on the screen here of a classic community level field, which is mostly struggling due to physical properties. It's a very heavy, this is
Yeah.
down at our Ithaca, New York Cass Park, which is right in the flood zone, very heavy soil, has never been amended with any sort of sand or compost.
Mhm.
And so really it just sort of comes down to, Frank, does it drain and does it have enough nutrients? And if it's doing those two things, man, you are set really well and you don't really have to interrupt it all that much to get the performance you need.
But I think it comes back. I think you're exactly right about everything. And what we're trying to figure out is what are the practical implications of whatever available science is there? Like, wouldn't it be great, Carl, if we could say that sand-based field, when it's performing well, will give you 25% more use hours across the board than, a native soil field, even with some drainage and some slope, right?
Mhm,
And in both cases, like sand-based fields, you're probably going to have to irrigate them regularly. You're going to have to add nutrients regularly. It's a much different management system because you don't have as much holding capacity there, right?
mhm,
And then the soil-based system is going to need more physical property management, like maintaining infiltration, make sure when it gets compacted, you can shatter it a little bit at
mhm.
different times of the year. But so much of that, Carl, is dependent on how much these get used.
Yeah.
We had a native soil field at T-Burg when I was on the school board. We didn't put synthetic turf in, it never came up. The field doesn't get that much use.
Mhm.
They played a couple of soccer games. For a couple of years, we didn't even have a football team.
Yeah.
Wasn't enough kids playing football. So I think, what we're trying to do with the website, and I think what you and I talk about all the time, we're going to keep having this conversation with Evan and with Chase and with everybody else that wants to talk sports fields with us. Sorokin, I want to talk to Kylie, his
Mhm.
guy, right? Is how does this, what we know about these things, translate to the people who just want to know how much they can use it? How much land do they need? How much money do they need to build it? How much money do they need to manage it? How many people is it going to take to do? You wonder why people go to synthetic turf, Carl. It's because it's a full turnkey operation. They don't
Mhm.
have to fuss about it at all. And that's why I think, we're getting ourselves into some situations with school districts now, right? This is a very
Mhm.
funny email we got going on
Mhm.
with Kimberly about this issue. And, the horses left the barn with the cart attached and the wagon fully loaded. That thing is well on its way to being completed. Okay, what do
Yeah.
you have to say about the relationship between, soils and usage? And I would add, we didn't talk about nitrogen, but you
Mhm.
got to have these nutrients, but then you get more wear, you got to use more nitrogen. You got to
Yep.
grow more to put up with the wear.
There's this triangle of field use, infrastructure, which is the soils and drainage, and then management, which is what you do to that system.
Yeah.
And all of those things play in.
Yeah.
And so generally what we can say is a native soil is probably going to support less play than a sand-based soil, a nice engineered mix. And both of those things are going to support much less play than a synthetic turf
That's
surface.
right.
And
That's right.
one of the questions a community member will ask is, well, if I don't want to put in a synthetic surface because I have concerns environmentally and the carbon cost and plastic, how many natural grass fields do I need?
Yeah.
And that is a
I'm
question
saying 2 to 1. I'm saying 2.5 to 1
at
because
least
you
two to
go
one.
out there at this time of year, Carl, right? You can't fertilize. You can fertilize till the cows come home. The
Mhm.
plant won't respond. And you
Correct.
wind up causing physical property damage to the soil that gets
Mhm.
very difficult to recover from.
Yeah.
So let me get through some weather, and then maybe we'll get back to this a little bit. But oddly enough, as really Art was saying we would get from the La Nina year, it turned out to be a very warm year, the warmest on record from November to January in the southwestern part of the United States all the way up to the Pacific Northwest because of the way the jet stream got messed up with because of the La Nina. Now we were in that period on the average end, but you see a clear mark across when you look at this segmented period of time. Right now we start to look at the oncoming of spring, and we start to see the very typical signals that we see in the southern part of the United States, which is right along the Gulf. It starts to warm up. Then there's this consistently cool zone across Carolina through the central part of Texas over to the panhandle of Texas, right? And then a little warmer to the north. And Carl, I don't think they got any snow in Colorado at all this year.
Yeah.
I think those people out there, it's been bone dry from a snow perspective. Even some of the places I saw in California the beginning of this week, very little snow in the mountains like we used to get. So, we're 2 weeks from the actual spring coming celestially. So we got time. So soils are cold, right? We're less than 32 degrees. You got to go to DC just to get into the 40s. So, we're going to get warmed up, right? We're going to talk about this. There's a high probability we're going to warm up a little bit. But let's just remember the soil's not going to, support any meaningful growth. And this lies at the heart of why we can't use grass fields. These guys are out there in March. That's why
Mhm.
maybe a synthetic field. I actually was talking to this person, Carl, interviewing me like, well, what is it going to take for natural grass to do it? I said, you need about 2.5 to 1. And if you want to use them at this time of year, you got to have heat.
Yeah.
You got to have heat. You got to actually be able to have the grass grow. And I mean, is that a realistic thing? I can't say. So
Mhm.
it's colder than normal, right? It definitely warmer to the south. Again, when you get to West Virginia and Pittsburgh area, it's a little bit warmer where Nick Menchek is. But the rest of the region is below normal temperatures the last week anyway. We're pretty dry. I was surprised to see this. About 73% of the Northeast is in some form of moisture deficit. Now, some of it's mild, but you see up, for your two or three cousins that still live in Maine, Carl, right? That it's pretty dry there. And so on the left here, you see what it's looked like since last September, right? We did have a dry fall, but I think it's important to note, right, the Buffalo area, the Tug Hill Plateau, right around Cooperstown, those were really wet areas as well, little pockets of wet that's, over that period of time. But you can see how the dryness has expanded dramatically in northern New England, through the, northeastern Pennsylvania, northern Jersey, and really dry spots out in Pennsylvania as well. Who knows what all this snow is doing to New England, but maybe it'll help the drought thing a little bit.
Mhm.
And it has been dry that same period from November to January. At the Northeast has been a little bit below average, but even much more so south of us. So the precip outlook is likely to be wet. Looks like we're going to be in a wet pattern for the next couple of weeks, and it says sort of, not really likely to be different than normal over the next 8 to 14 days. But I believe I've seen a little bit that's suggesting we are going to get a little bit of warm up. I did hear from the missus that the pig mud is in some sort of uber stage right now, where pig, it was frozen for a long time and the frost is still coming out of it. So, mud and playing around outside, is Elm Tree open is the question, Carl.
I
Is
I
Elm
don't
Tree
think
open?
no, I think it's going to be too wet. We got quite a bit of rain yesterday, but you're saying warm up. We're going to be 70 degrees early next week, and I'll
Yeah,
also note the Scholastic spring sports calendar starts March 9th for New York State.
March
So
9th.
it's going to be Monday and 70 degrees. Those athletes are going to want to be out. The golfers are going to want to be out.
Yeah.
And man, we worry about some of the soil repercussions from
Yeah, I mean and the thing is, when you're trafficking turf, and this is, I think, something you've talked about before, when you're trafficking turf in the winter, right? When it's not growing, you're doing a lot of damage to it, right? You're really setting it back. I mean, we're not talking about Poa annua in the Pacific Northwest, right? Where you can still get some growth out of it, or overseeded, Bermuda grass in the desert Southwest. You're just not getting growth, and you wind up. That's why you need so many fields, and even more so in the spring, because I know we've talked about Ben Palmer. He tries to restrict where he puts them, right? They
Mhm,
got to wear sneakers, right? You got to make those adaptations to get the most out of your soil-based fields, right?
mhm.
And sometimes you just sacrifice one and you
Yep.
say, listen, yeah, just go tear it up for 2 months, and then we'll rest it for 3 months, get it back to normal. And it's just one of those fields you just tear up every once in a while. And I think, but we're not being creative, Carl, because, like our good pal
Mhm.
Chris Sitko said to us, nobody's out selling natural grass,
Yeah.
right? Nobody's
Yep.
out selling it. And so there isn't a lot of creativity about ways of doing it unless you've got a real creative manager who's willing to do that. And certainly at the scholastic level, we have a limited number of folk that are able to do it. Now,
Yeah.
listen, I think we're getting close, but I wanted to ask you, I when I was reading your automation thing that we're going to be adding to the school district
Hmm.
website, I was, one of the ways I think about this is, what are we going to do with those staff hours? Because there's going to be staff hours
Hmm.
that are gained. I'm not suggesting there's going to be less people, because what I would say is invest in this technology, keep the people, and everything gets better because now you can reallocate those hours. I think when you look at some studies that have looked at when you start automating things, and we're starting to see this impact the job market dramatically, right? But, you probably had a lot of people banging keys. Maybe you didn't even need banging keys,
Hmm.
but they were banging keys, right? But I think we're looking at probably losing about 40% of the workforce. I think 40% of the hours, right? Not the workforce, but 40% of the hours,
Yeah.
like in mowing or something, like spraying or bunkers. I love that. Even
Hmm.
rolling, any of this automation that's going to come in the next decade. What are you going to do with that extra 40% of the labor that, are you just going to cut it? Like budgets up, we're going to cut it? Because then you're in the same boat. You're no
Hmm.
better off, other than you have less people and it costs you less. But nothing, and the fields might improve, right? You talk to
Right.
McElroy, he says sports fields improve from this frequent cutting because the increase in density. What are your thoughts about automation?
I think with school districts who are already labor short, I think what it does is it simply raises the level of the field and keeps all the other labor hours instead of sitting on a mower. And a lot of times there's if I do this, then I can't do that. If I go out and mow the fields, then I can't do stuff indoor in the indoor facilities or around the mulch beds of the school or something, or doing stuff along the fence lines.
Yeah.
And I think what robotic mowing and robotic painting can do is just alleviate that decision of, well, I can only do A or B. It's, oh, I can do A now. Mowing happens. Now I can go touch up the insides. I can go do HVAC stuff. I can hand overseed the high
Target
traffic areas.
Airify.
I can
Target
level
Airify.
heads. Yeah, those are the things that,
Backpack spray or organic burn down 25B
Mhm.
products
They
on
got,
some of your
I've even
weeds.
heard of a BOCES region that has the foam weeder, the thermal foam weeder, and they share that within a district and it works really well. Those are the sorts of things I think at the operations who have very limited labor, I
Yeah.
think it raises the level of the fields versus when you get to a private golf course that's thinking about robotic mowing, that's when you're probably going to be reducing the labor force because you already have enough to do all the things you need to do. But I
Yeah.
try and view it in a positive lens of we're going to improve quality across the board.
That's what we all hope for. And we are there at the witching hour.
Yep. And
All right.
we got 30 minutes here. One question, Frank, from Randy, why is everyone always rushing to put down nitrogen before it's even warmed up? And so he mentions 50 to 55. Why would people be doing that? Is there a good reason to do that early in the spring, Frank?
Um, um, I have seen responses when the soil's in the 50s from ammonium nitrate, calcium nitrate. Sometimes that can goose the system. But unless you've got I've only seen that work in a stadium. I've not seen that work
Mhm.
in any other spot. I think in some places, again, the Pacific Northwest, you can get a little bit more, but there's still growth potential. I think
Yeah.
fundamentally you can't overcome the limitations of temperature and moisture. Now, we're not short of moisture right now, but you certainly can't overcome the temperature stuff. Yeah, we
And where's it going to go? It's probably not going to go in the plant. It's
no,
probably going
it's
down
leaching
into the
through
water.
or it's running off. All right, we got to go. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
See you,
everybody.
Carl.
See
Be
you guys
good.
next week.
This has been a production of Cornell University. On the web at cornell.edu.